I was pulled out of class. I went to the principal's office. Had no idea. Initially we were told there had been a terrorist event.
Beyond that, Brennan Basnicki knew very little about what had just happened in New York City. He was 16 years old and in the 10th grade, attending high school in Toronto.
My uncle had gone to the school. He picked me up. My mother was a flight attendant at the time, so she was in Germany on a layover. My dad had actually called my grandmother and said he was in the North Tower of the World Trade Center, there was smoke.
48-year-old Ken Basnicki had just been promoted, and New York City was his first trip in his new role.
I think I was just kind of lost. It was pretty blurry, I think, for the next few days. Going from, my grandmother's house to our house to, my mom finally getting back from Germany. I think that took a few days because the airways all closed after that. So she was stranded there.
And my father, Kenneth William Basnicki.
Family was a core part of my life, and what did we do as a family? A lot. It was, the ski trips, the cottage, a lot of these sports activities, everything. And then kind of after that, losing my dad, who was generally the one leading these activities and stuff, I kind of lost that focus or that desire. It wasn't until my mid or late 20s that I kind of embraced some of these activities again.
The internet was not what it is now 20 years ago. We had Yahoo Messenger was the big communication device. Texting wasn't a thing yet.
Stephen Gerhardt remembers well the last conversation he had with his brother.
He was starting to think about moving in with his girlfriend, so he wanted to talk to me. I was getting ready to go to Dallas on a business trip, and I said, hey, let me give you a call on Tuesday the 11th. I'll be back home, and we can have a conversation then.
Ralph Gerhardt was 34 years old and working for Cantor Fitzgerald on the 105th floor of the North Tower.
My brother had called my dad and said he was fine. They were looking to get out and he'd be in touch. And he never called back. And my parents were like, we want to keep the line open until we hear from him. So I was like, all right, I can't call them. Ralph hasn't called me.
By the time Stephen had arrived in New York, his parents had already driven in from Toronto.
There were so many false hopes. People had put fake internet lists of survivors, taken staff lists from companies like Cantor, and every seventh name they pulled off the list and said survive.
Ontario's chief coroner was brought in to help identify the Canadian victims. By this point, DNA technology was still relatively new.
Unfortunately, he was one of the many that was never identified. They still haven't identified remains from everybody just because there was nothing found to be identified. But I knew I had realized that he wasn't going to be with us anymore. And to this day, you still think, hey, I want to send Ralph that quick email, or hey, I want to tell him this funny joke. And, it takes a second and then it's like, yeah, I can't do that anymore.
Cantor Fitzgerald lost 658 people that day, Ralph and his girlfriend Linda among them. Their names are now etched into the 9/11 memorial in Lower Manhattan, beside one another. Shallima Maharaj, Global News.